Hey guys, what's going on? This is Pantsar Dragon, and today we're doing a rundown of the patch 5.6 notes, giving you my insight, what I think is going to change, what might happen to meta, analyzing some things, yada yada. For you guys to get into my head, I think this will be a good analogy, so hope you guys enjoy the show. Alright, so right here, Aatrox is getting a buff. It now grants 20% of maximum blood well for each enemy hit with your R, which is pretty good, but I mean, before you had to prep your blood well, you had to hit some minions, use some life, use your QE, whatever, and then restore with your W, but now you get to do this, so it's kind of good. But the reason I don't think he's going to be good is because of his last nerf, which was a way long ago in Season 3. His base damage on his E was 255, now it got reduced to 210, so you can wave clear as efficiently and stall out the game more. And also, his passive did get nerfed from 50% attack speed to 30%, but it did scale with level up to 55% at max level, so that's the reason why I don't think he's good. They have to add something more than this. This is only good for team fighting and 2v2s in the top lane, and maybe by then if he's a top laner, he probably has maximum blood well already, so whatever. With this change, it does kind of help just a little bit, but not by that much. Alright, so Mumu's getting a bug fix, but I don't think that really matters. And then next up, we'll be talking about Annie. Annie is getting a nerf on her Tibbers Sunfire Cape damage. It's going from 35 to 20 at level 6, 30, and then 40, which is a buff at level 16, but 5 damage more at late game. I don't think it's that big of a deal. And this is directed more towards support Annie because she relies more on base damage. People are running Righteous Glory for those really hard initiations. Mid Annie still has AP ratios for that Sunfire, so I don't think it matters that much. Of course, it is still a nerf, but she can catch up in levels and finally make it what it used to be at level 11, just a tiny bit off a little. But definitely for support Annie, this hurts her more because in the bot lane, I think those could be extended trades. So Tibbers would latch onto someone and kind of try and stick to them, making use of that Sunfire. So yeah, maybe mid Annie gets bursted out, Tibbers dies earlier, but support Annie, I think she lives a long time, and because of she builds tanky, so this is definitely a hurt to support Annie, and you'll probably see less of her in competitive play because of this change. Alright, so next up we'll be talking about Bard, and right here Bard is getting a buff, but it's kind of a small buff. As you can see, instead of doing 215 damage, he does 240 with his Q, and his magical journey is being reduced from 26 to 20. The only reason you're looking at these two numbers is because you max it out last, and these two buffs are really small. I think he needs more. His win rate is like 30% or something like that. It's really low, so it is an overall buff, but I don't think this buff will make him a good champion. Maybe he's good in competitive play, no one's used him yet, but right now I just don't think he's that great for solo queue. Alright, so next up we'll be talking about Cassiopeia, and basically what's happening is they're changing the dragon buff and Rabadon's death cap and how it interacts with Cassiopeia's passive. So it's going to be 12% less bonus ability power at late game. So I'm thinking maybe like 5 items or 6 items, which is pretty hard to get. So I don't think it matters that much. It is 12% less, and even then, if it is 12% less bonus ability power, I still probably have like 900 or something like that. And I remember playing Cassiopeia with full build. It's really fun. You have Archangel Staff to give you that shields or Seraph's Embrace. You also have Zonia's, so that's a lot of armor. And I just feel like she's still going to be super strong late game. It doesn't hurt early game and mid game, so that's pretty good. So she's still going to be strong. This doesn't mean that much, and yeah, that's about it. Alright, so right here Elise is getting an overall buff. Her human form is being decreased by 5 movement speed, but her spider form is being increased by 10, which is a lot in my opinion. That means she can be more mobile around the map. She's gonna put down her early game pressure a lot more, and yeah, just having more gank pressure and stuff. Her missile speed does get increased, so that means the enemy has less time to react to the cocoon shooting at him. And I want to be talking about her current state. Right now, with the Cinder Hulk coming, it's kind of weird for her since she's not really a health stacking jungler, and she'll be outclassed definitely by all the tanks. But of course, since there's a lot more tanks in this game right now, her Q does maximum or like current health damage and then missing health damage, so that could be an interesting factor. Maybe she might come back with this change. I'm definitely not sure But I mean, right here, this is a big buff, and I definitely want to be using her. And I'll probably build Cinder Hulk on her just because AP is kind of weird, makes you feel squishy, and Cinder Hulk kind of helps with your clears a bit. But I'm going to try both. I want to see what's better. I feel like Cinder Hulk would be better, but that's my opinion. And yeah, I think a lot more people are going to definitely be using her more. Alright, so next up we'll be talking about Evelyn, and right here her stealth is getting a late game buff, as you can see, and her W is getting a change. For me, in my opinion, I think it's a late game nerf, but it is an early game buff, and I'll be explaining why. So spell hits now lower Dark Frenzy's cooldown by 1 second. So that means I think if you press Q or E on, say, a minion or a jungle creep, you can get more lower cooldown on your W, so you can just spam it in the jungle and get those faster clears. But now I'll be explaining why this is a late game nerf. So flat movement speed is 20 at max level, which is at level 18. And the thing is, in team fights, you'll be already getting champion kills and assists to refresh Dark Frenzy's cooldown, so why do you need to load a cooldown of a 15-second thing that's probably not going to activate it in a team fight more than once, as long as you don't get any champion kills and assists? Why do you need to reduce the cooldown by 1 by resting Q and E? And that's my opinion. You're losing, this flat movement speed stack, which does stack up to 4 times, which is a lot. So overall, in team fights, I feel like it is going to be a nerf. But for the early game, you go around the jungle faster and can move faster, so that might help. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, with this buff, it probably won't change her. She's still probably going to be bad, so I don't think she's coming back as of now. Alright, so right here, Galio's E is getting a buff. It's going down from 12 seconds and 9 seconds at max rank. And you might think he's viable now, like he's fun to play in the mid and top lane, but as of like really good champions for mid lane and top lane, I don't think he suits there yet, just because his ultimate relies on him having flash, and waiting until that flash is up is going to be a long time, even if you have distortion boots. But like having that inconsistency with him is kind of bad. At least he can still poke with his Q and E. But honestly, he might come back just because Chalice is getting buffed in this patch. But I just don't see it right now. Unless a lot of people are running a lot of heavy AP comps, then maybe. But having that inconsistency on his ultimate and relying on flash up most of the time is what is dragging him down. Alright, so next up we'll be talking about Aurelia, and right here her base damage is just getting nerfed at level 5. It'll be reduced by 40 damage, and honestly it did do quite a bit of damage. 50 damage per level is really strong for any kind of skill, and that should probably be toned down, of course, but she's still going to be good. 40 damage ain't shit, and she's still probably going to be played in top lane for sure. Alright, so next up we'll be talking about Katarina, and right here she's getting another nerf despite one of the other patches before. And it is base stats, so it's kind of hard to estimate how well she's going to do in terms of win rates, but she's still probably going to be played in mid lane as a solo queue type champion. So yeah, not much to say here, of course. Alright, so next up, Karthus's auto attack frame is being improved, and I actually think this means something, at least for his jungle clears, and only jungle Karthus, because in the jungle if you had 15 or 10% CDR, you might miss an auto attack in between your Qs. So now maybe you can go Q auto attack consistently. Before, I'd only do Q, cancel my auto attack, and then Q, so that's just 2 Qs and no auto attack. But that's what I think about it. So let's move on to LeBlanc. Alright, so right here, LeBlanc's AP ratios on her R is getting nerfed just a tiny bit. For Q and E, the AP ratio of the full combo is reduced by 0.1, or Mimic Distortion is reduced by 0.075, so it's not that big. I think it's about, if you have 400 AP, it's only 30 to 40 less damage on all of her mimicked abilities, so it is small and it only varies on your AP ratio, so it's kind of decent, but she's still probably going to be strong in the mid lane, of course. So next up, Lux is getting a bug fix onto her passive and R. Basically what it's saying is you can now trigger your passive with your ultimate, which adds a 0.2 AP ratio onto your full rotation combo, as long as people have been hit by the Q or E. So it is, it is a pretty good buff, but I think she just has some other problems, like not being able to wave clear the back minions fully with her E. Her E costs like 130 mana at rank 5, so right now she's she's in an awkward spot. I don't like her, and this obviously won't bring her up to one of the top mids right now. Alright, so next up we'll talk about Nocturne, and right here his cooldown on his ultimate at level 6 is being reduced by 30 seconds, and at level 11 it's going to be 15 seconds. So they're trying to emphasize his early game a bit more and making him, gank more. But honestly, I feel like they're tank junglers right now who are really strong at the moment, along with your top tier junglers like Rek'Sai, and I think Vi, and Nidalee, of course. So he's definitely not going to be with them right now just because of this buff. I think he needs a bit more. So yeah, he's decent. I'd say if there was a tier, like tier 1, 2, 3, he'd be like tier 3 or 2. And that's my opinion of him. Next up is going to be Quinn, and as you can see, she gets a reset on her auto attack when she uses her E, and a bunch of bug fixes to make her less clunkier. Obviously with this buff, it's not going to help her that much. She's pretty shit at the moment, so yeah. And right here, Rammus is just getting a late game buff. This is the last thing you max out. You max out W and E, so it doesn't matter in early levels. So you're looking at 60 mana versus 70 mana. So that means 10 mana less. Pretty good. I think he's pretty strong right now, especially for solo queue, just because of that new Cinder Hulk item, of course. Alright, so right here we're going to be talking about Rise, and right here he's getting a buff from 120 damage to 135 damage, which is a 15 increased. And you have to remember, this is his main source of damage, what he uses the most when harassing his laners and in team fights for damage. And the reason people stopped playing him was because it used to be at 160, which is incredible. So that means when he got levels, he was still very useful because he did a lot of damage. And since it's not, 160, I feel like some people do still play him right now. Like there's some players, I've seen them, not like high yellow, but back when I was like Diamond 5, I've seen that. And so this helps them, but honestly, I think he needs more than just 15 more damage. Alright, so next up we're going to be talking about Sejuani a bit, and her W and R are getting a nerf. As you can see, 12% to 10% since this is what you max out first, so that's 2% less damage, kind of like the Maokai nerf on his W. And then her slow on her R, if you don't hit the stun and it kind of hits him a bit, this is what you're going to get, is 30%. But the reason I don't think these nerfs are that big is because she still scales with health, so that means the more she builds health, the more damage she does with her swinging that flail thing. And the slow, well, if you do land the slow, you still can permafrost people, which is about like 60% slow. So this doesn't hurt her. I feel like she's still going to be number 1 for the jungle, and she's still going to have like a super high win rate, and of course just be dominant and good in the mid, late, and early game. Alright, so right here, Singe is getting a buff on his E, at least for when he's hitting tanks and like bruisers, because they have the most hit point. On squishies in the late game, since they only have 1900 health, it is a small damage nerf. It's only like 18 off, but it's not even that big, so it doesn't matter at that point. So yeah, he can just fling big tanks and damage them now. But it's kind of a lousy change, I feel, because a lot of champions you see right now, Sejuani, Sion, Maokai, all have this damage, maximum health damage for some reason. I'm not sure why, but it is an overall buff for those Singe mains who like Inverted Composer, Searches. Actually, I don't think Searches plays it anymore. There's all these Singe mains are probably going to be happy, and like for competitive, I'm not sure, because no one really plays Singe because he's kind of like, you got a proxy kind of thing or have this weird playstyle. So it could be countered or something like that, but he's Singed, so I don't play him. I don't have a good opinion of him. Alright, so right here, Jungle Sion and top lane Sion are both getting a nerf. For instance, his Q isn't going to be doing that much damage as it did before to monsters, even though they did buff the AD ratio just a tiny bit. So I'm kind of confused why they don't just lower that AD ratio again. And as for top lane, this is what the damage looks like now. As you can see, instead of 315, it's now going to do 273 when you do knock that minion into the enemy. So it is only 40 less damage. And right here at level 1, it's only 10 less damage. Then when you put 2 points, 20 less damage. So it is a nerfed, but It just kind of hits his laning phase, and he is pretty good in the laning phase, of course, but even if he gets dominated or gets ahead in the laning phase, he's just a super ultra CC tank who's really tanky, hard to kill, and brings a lot of CC in team fights, so he's still going to be really good, especially for competitive and solo queue. It might take him down as a top laner, you know, from rank 1 to 2, but honestly, he'll probably be number 1 for sure in my books. Alright, so Twitch right here is getting a really small buff. So from levels 1 to 3, he used to do 1 damage per stack, but now from levels 1 to 3, and of course 4, he'll be doing 2 damage, which can add up to 12 damage per second. True damage, of course. But what he really needs, I think, is to revert that AD, the base nerf they did on his AD a while back to where it was, and I think he'll be a fine champion if they just did that. I think the stealth nerf was good, because it was really annoying to try and gank him because he would just stealth. So if they just revert that AD nerf, and I think he'll be good. I think. I'm not sure. Alright, so next we're going to be talking about Veigar, and right here, his Q is getting a range buff, his passive is getting more mana regen, and now enemies cannot dash through his wall, so you're going to be basically caging up people, except for people like Ezreal who can just teleport out, Kassadin, etc. You can still lock them up, and honestly, I will say I saw one support Veigar. It was pretty decent before this patch. So maybe with this patch he'll be viable as a support again, like Elimination played him one time. I mean, it's not instant anymore, but it can still lock people down, so it's interesting to see, of course, but I don't think mid Veigar is that great, since they nerfed the AP ratios, the instant stun, and yeah, it kind of sucks. Alright, so right here, Vel'Koz can finally take Thresher's Lantern without cancelling his ultimate. Yark is getting a range increase on his Q, and Ziggs's mana on his Q is being reduced, which is probably pretty good. I think he can go the Morello route right now before he had to keep going Athene's, because, you know, he had a lot of mana issues with 90 mana. So 70, feel like Morello is a viable item on him right now. And maybe with this change he'll come back. I think he might come back. I mean, there are people who play him. I know Odd One, when he plays mid lane, he plays Ziggs, and I see it being pretty good. Maybe with that Luden's Echo, of course. I think that's a great item on like Poke champions or people who can use a lot of skills. I think it's going to be good on this guy too. But yeah, you'll probably see him come back. Alright, so they're going to be buffing Zilean in this patch. Health per level is being increased, AP ratio is being increased, mana costs are being reduced on basically all his skills, and the W cooldown for the lower levels are being lowered. But it's the same at the last level. So, in my opinion, this is good because his mana costs were so high, I'd have to buy a tier. That's the only way I could like survive roaming around and casting my spells. But the thing is, his Q is still a skill shot. It's not reliable. I think it needs more range, or be instant to get the stun off people. So that's my opinion of him. He's definitely still a really bad champion, I think. Since that Q is just so unreliable to get the stun, and he has no other utility but his E. I feel like the E was also a nerf, like when they changed it. So it kind of sucks, but yeah, that's my opinion of him. I don't think he's good. Alright, so next up, Chalice and Athene's Unholy Grail are getting a buff. The cost is being lowered by 100 gold on the Chalice. And right here, the mana gen plus the mana restore on kill assist is being increased, which is pretty good. The only reason people weren't buying Athene's Holy Grail is because Morello Nomicon basically did what they needed for mana regen, like Orianna, Ahri, all those champions. And the only reason you'd buy Athene's Unholy Grail was for the magic resist, the 25 magic resist. So that means you'd buy it against, say, Lissandra top and Rumble mid. Wait, an Orianna mid or something like that. You know, double AP. That's the only time you'd buy Athene's Unholy Grail. But now, I think with the incentive of the mana regen being increased and this too, for those heavy mana cost mid laners, and of course this cost being lowered, I think people are going to orient to buy this more in that situation. Alright, so next up we're going to be talking about not the Righteous Glory, it just gets a bug fix, but the Rift Scuttler. So the vision radius is being reduced to 525 from 1350, and what does this mean? I think that before, you could, with 1350 radius, you could see the jungler coming in from this ramp, this ramp, this ramp, and of course a bit of this area too, when you got the Scuttler, when you killed it. But right now, they reduced the vision so much that you'll probably be having vision of just the Baron Pit, like who's going to be entering it, and of course getting that movement speed buff still. So when you did kill that Scuttle Crab, it would protect your top lane and mid lane from any kind of ganks. But now, you're just going to be probably protecting the Baron and Dragon, of course. And I think people will still prioritize it because it does give you a movement speed buff and 80 gold if you have the second tier jungle item, so it's really worth it. But definitely it'll emphasize people getting more rewards, I guess. Next up, we're going to be talking about jungle XP. So right here, they want to make junglers in between solo laners and duo laners. That's why they're increasing the XP just a tiny bit, but they don't want to overdo it and make like super carry junglers who get past solo laners, so it's only going to be minimal for now. And yeah, it does help. We can carry more as junglers, so this is a good thing. And I'm happy, because we can carry. Hopefully. Overall, it is a buff for us. And that is it for today. A bunch of these changes are just for other things and some bug fixes and stuff. I don't really care. So hopefully you guys enjoyed my insight, what I offered to give, all these patch rundown stuff, blah blah blah, analyzing things, what I think is going to go happen. And yeah, I am Panzer Dragon, and I'll see you guys next time.